shift occurs without permission. In this video, we'll be looking at shifts. Shift is something that is very, very important and very sensitive to human life. So many times, so many things has changed, so many things has shifted, and we are still in the past. And that is why we find it difficult to meet up with some certain things in our life. Most times it's so difficult to meet up with the way the world is moving because our mind, our perspective, everything about us has not shifted. And this is very important because you need to understand time and season. When you understand time and season, it really helps you in getting your mind prepared for every changes that come. Okay, look at it this way. Some years ago, you have several things around you. You play with things that you can make with your hand. You play with things you can see in your environment. But children going up to these days come up with playing with high-tech stuffs all around them. You find them opening your phone without knowing your password. You find out that they could operate your phone more than you. Do you know why? So many things has changed, and there's a shift in intellectually, because these children, you can't just quantify how this happened in their life. You just find out that a 2-year baby can do what you cannot do. You think, what is happening? Shift has occurred. And this also happens spiritually, because we need to understand this. When God called Moses to the burning bush, and the experience at the burning bush is so different from the experience of Joshua when God called Joshua. Look at this. Moses was called to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt, not to take them to Israelites, because that generation he led out of Egypt died in the wilderness. They spent 40 years in the wilderness, and a generation is a time frame of 40 years. By the time it was 40 years, God wiped off all those generations, including Moses, his servant, and he called Joshua to lead the new generation out of where they are to the promised land. And the way God worked with them was so different. Moses parted the Red Sea. Joshua also parted Jordan. Moses did miracle. When they were fighting while Moses was on the mountain, they have to hold his hand so that war can continue and they can be victorious. But look at Joshua. Joshua stopped sun, stopped the moon, stopped a whole day for him to fight battles, which means there's a particular shift. And if you look at the life of Joshua very well, it was so difficult. God told him, he said, Joshua, as I am with Moses, I am with you. And only one thing that God asked Joshua not to forget is the book of law, which came directly from God. But every other thing, God did not ask Joshua to copy. Joshua doesn't have to copy any pattern, any method from Moses. All he has to do is to follow God, because God is God that doesn't stay in a particular. He's a progressive God. So because he's a progressive God, shift occurs in so many times. So from scripture, you find that there is shifts in the way God deals with men. God shifts his attention sometimes from a certain person to another person. Look at Old Testament and New Testament. Look at the great shift that happened. When Jesus came, there is serious problem with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they refuse to shift. They thought the stuff was all about the law, why God has given them the Messiah they are looking for. But because they are so rigid in their thinking, they are so rigid in their mindset, they are so rigid in their worldview, they could not see what God is doing at that particular time. What am I saying? What I'm saying to you as a spiritual person, as a Christian, is that you need to understand how God moves, because God shifts attention from one generation to another. And after Jesus Christ, God shifts attention away from the Jew, and he shifted that attention to the 12 disciples, and the church started. And you see all these things, that's why we have rift here, rift there, because we don't understand what God is doing part-time. We need to understand what God is doing part-time as a Christian, and that is what will help us. God doesn't use yesterday method for today, because God is God of different method. But one thing that doesn't change: value and the message. Value and message doesn't change, but God changes his method. And this is a great shift, because as a Christian you must follow the train of shift so that you can meet up with what God is doing. If you are not following that train of shift, you cannot meet up with what God is doing. Instead, you will be fighting what God is doing. As a Christian, you need to understand where God is and how God is moving. Sometimes we are still in the past while God is no longer where we are. God has shifted his attention to somewhere else. And these are the reasons, these are the issues we have with other Christians. When God has shifted his attention to somebody else and he has changed his method and his pattern, we will still be fighting because we are still in the old pattern and old method, not understanding what God is doing at that particular time. And you also have cultural shifts. What are we saying? Suddenly you just find out that major things that is so acceptable in your culture is no longer acceptable. There are some things that we were being told that we did not investigate. There were things that was passed down to us that we think that's the whole truth. But along the line, we find out that it is not this we find out that what they told us is not actually true. So our mind start to shift from that particular word being sold out to us. So this happens, and we need to be sensitive to the move of God, to the shift in the spirit, because if you don't understand that, you will be behind, and you might also be an hindrance to what God is doing at particular time when God is working. So this shift helps us to change our perspective about life, to change our mindset, and to change how we think and how we do things. Sometimes ago, people believe that being a Christian is to be poor, but we found that along the line there is a shift in thinking, there is a shift in reasoning, there is a shift in everything. I found that no, being a Christian doesn't mean you should be poor. But this has been sold for so many years until this time. But some people are still in that past, believing that if you are a Christian, you have to be poor, that the tribulation, the suffering God is talking about is poverty, which is totally not true. It is not poverty. It's talking about persecution for your faith, persecution for your belief, persecution for what you stand for. So these are the things I want us to consider. I'm putting to us, and I want us to find time and think and meditate about this. God shifts his attention, and God shifts from generation to generation. I want you to understand this. Like I said in my introduction, shift occur without permission. It doesn't need your permission. You are the one that needs to wake up and follow the shift or the move of God at every given time. So I want you to have your comments at comment section. I want to know your view, your perspective concerning the word shift. And with this, I know we'll be able to discuss better than this time. And I'll also put my WhatsApp number on the screen, so you can also chat me up, and where we can discuss further. Thank you. Please, I would like you to subscribe. Please subscribe, share this video to your friends, and press on your notification button so I can get our newest content. Thank you.